All right. So this video I'm going to be showing you how to put together your After Effects composition, adding some audio and exporting out a video, as well as doing a little bit of color correction. So what we'll need to do is go ahead and do an import file. And we will make sure we click on one of these, make sure it says open EXR sequence. You only need to click on one. Don't click on multiples, just one. Click import. We're going to go ahead and do a new composition. It's going to be only really 10 seconds. Since we're doing 10 seconds, or 5 seconds, I'm sorry. 5 seconds video. Frame rate is 24. It's a 720, so we're good there. We want to make sure that the footage is actually 24 frames a second. So you'll see when I bring it down into here, it actually doesn't fill up the whole 5 seconds of footage, even though we have 120 frames. So what we'll need to do is actually change this. We'll need to reinterpret the footage, excuse me, from 24 frames or 30 frames to 24 frames. Click OK, and you'll see it'll snap over here. So we need to actually pull this over to where we actually get footage movement. And check our footage, looks good. Perfect. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and add some audio. So let's do freesound.org. And let's just find some sounds. Maybe that's a little bit much. Perfect, we'll do this one. All right. Okay, so we got downloaded. Drag it over, drop it in, import. Good enough. If you don't like where the audio is, you can move it left or right to get it to kind of be wherever you need it to be. If it's too long, or if it's too short, you can trim it. Or if it's too long, if you want to cut like parts of it out, Control-Shift-D actually will let you cut. So you can cut out bits and pieces as you need to. Honestly, something like this is probably better done in Premiere, but it works just fine in After Effects. As you can see here, I have a blackness of space, which I don't really want to see. So we're going to actually put in let's do a background image. So I'm going to grab a image of a sunset. I don't know why, just am. So it's going to go drop into here. It's going to go in the background. Even though the shadows are all completely wrong, but that's fine. And you'll see that it doesn't really move with the background, so I can kind of animate it if I want to. I'm going to set a key here at my end frame, and then my beginning frame. Let's see if that'll do it. Let's see. I'm just trying to move it, try to keep it kind of there. So you see that kind of works. So it's not, honestly, what you could do is turns it into like a 3D scene and actually track the camera, but it's not really the point of what we're doing here. So anyway, we're just sticking a thing on there. And so what we can do is also go ahead and make an adjustment layer. So adjustment layer is going to go on top. And then also do color correction curves. And so the color correction, the curves thing here is a way for us to do color grading or color correction. And so it works basically off of this ramp. So darker values are going to be down here, usually around here. Brighter value is going to be up here. And then we can kind of sort of change how those values are perceived. So if we want to make like the entire image brighter, we can just bring the curve up. If we want to make the entire image darker, we can do this. But we can also say, hey, I want my basically a higher contrast between my highlights and my shadows. So you see here, I was getting darker in the shadowy areas, and it gets brighter in the lighter areas. That's kind of a way you can kind of mess around with it. You can do an auto where it kind of automatically goes through and does a few things. We can also change it where, let's see, what are we doing here? Hang on, I think I got annotation turned on. There we go. What are we doing? Oh, I must have had the pen turned on. Okay. Reset, reset, reset. Reset. Okay, so like we can also just work with like our red values. So I can make just red change if I need to. I can also change it over to green. And I'll mess with those values and see how it'll change. And then also do the same thing with blue. That kind of messes up and changes and stuff. So anyway, you can kind of get like little bit more of an interesting look out of it that way. Okay, let's go and talk about actually exporting out the video. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. In order to get an H.264 video out of Adobe After Effects, we do have to do our media encoder. So I'm going to click on that. All right. So I do have H.264 already loaded in here. Let me show you how to find it if you don't see it. So it's basically, if you just type in H.264, it'll bring up presets, and you'll see one that says H.264. There's several of these. The one that I'm using is, you can do a match source high bit rate. You can also do a high quality, and then you have like a 480, 720, 1080, 160, so that's like a 2K. You guys are actually going to be doing it at 720, so you may want to just go ahead and do a 720. So it's kind of weird if you're trying to like upsize a video that was already made at, you know, or rendered at 720, trying to export it out at 1080. That's just not going to work very well. So I just deleted that off, and so now we're just going to export this out at 720. Go ahead and give it a name. So let's just go on the desktop. I'm going to save it under test. We'll do test export. Click save. And then go in and click go. And it's going to export out the video. And that's pretty much it. And done. So if we go and check it out, there is going to be a, let's desktop this, right? Test. Open up video. Got audio. There we go. Perfect. Now you may notice this little white line right here. That's actually coming in from the alpha. We can actually get rid of that. Let me show you how to get rid of that. So this is called Matte Choker. Right here, it's called Matte Choker. And I'm gonna go and drag that onto my render. So I'm gonna go here, Matte Choker, and you'll see that that little white line disappears. Turn it off. Let's see if it comes back. Turn it back on. It gets rid of it. Basically, what's happening is it is chewing up the last little bit. It's choking essentially the last little bit of pixels, just like that. So that makes it look a little bit more believable. There you go. So let me show you a scene that I did and just kind of maybe talk about a few minutes of like maybe what I was going through or thinking about when I was working on it, and give you guys some ideas. So let's do this one. I'm gonna go and save this. First. Okay. So this is the new for the new film Pango, The Adventures of Pango. And let's see. This is it. There it is. So this is actually the opening shot for the film, and this is basically the opening shot where the starship kind of flies into frame, and then it's going toward this other large ship right here. So this is kind of Star Warsy in um, in its kind of vein or theme. Um, it's actually made up of a couple different renders. So the shot itself, the actual 3D shot, is composed of um, a planet, which you see back behind, although technically you could get away with not with making that just 2D. The starship that flies into frame, and then the large capital ship, the large transport ship that is in the far background that the ship is flying towards. The star field is just a image I got off of NASA, and there were some different effects that I applied on here to try to get it to um, appear a little bit more realistic. So some like different focusing effects, motion blur, stuff like that. Some tracking that was done to get the star field to stick with like the planet, along with some hand animation that was done. So just let it kind of, excuse me, kind of move forward here and get the whole shot kind of pre-rendered. So while it's going, I'll just maybe talk for a second about maybe the lighting, since that might be interesting too. The planet itself is just a simple sphere with a Pixar surface shader. I think everything I did on it was procedural, meaning I didn't use any actual texture images or anything like that. There was like a noise and aurora noise that I used to create the gradient in the clouds, as well as I used a ramp shader to create the variation in color from the kind of bluish color right here to the brighter green. The idea was that the light's coming in from the right side, so it's actually hitting this part of the planet and illuminating it. So when I rendered it, I actually ended up rendering 3 separate files. The camera move was the same in each one of the files, but it was actually the planet was in one of the files that I rendered. So I literally have a shot that is just the planet, another one that is just this little ship, and then the last one is like just this large starship here. So it's almost finished. So you'll see the final shot. Just like that. Let's kind of go into see how I broke this up. Okay. So each one of these, let's move up here. Each one of these pre-comps inside of After Effects, which is pre-comps are literally the same thing. It's just the composition we created. It's just another composition within a composition. That's all it is. It's composition inception, if you will. And so the first one is going to be the starship right here. So this is actually by itself. And if we look at that one, you'll see that this is actually the beauty shot of the starship. And I think, I haven't talked about this yet, but I used what's called AOVs. And AOVs essentially are a separated file or separated out image files that we could use to kind of look at different aspects of the shot or of the of the render. So this one is like just some shadows that I put into here to make it look a little bit more realistic. Okay. So that is on its own composition. And then if we back out, we have another one that is just the planet. Planet's just literally by itself. And I did put an adjustment layer on it. And I think for the adjustment layer, I just put an effect for glow. And so you'll see that that kind of just illuminates the side of the planet just a little bit more. And then I did a Gaussian blur on it as well. And then I kind of played around with the curves. It's very, very light. If you look close, you can see the difference. It just kind of just subtly brings up a little bit more color. So this is pretty standard when it comes to working with batch renders. It would be understood that you would be, when you're doing compositing, you would be going in and altering the color just a little bit if you need to, or a lot if you need to. And then also the last one is the main capital ship. And so this guy has an adjustment layer as well as composited a composite what's called an albedo, which is just a blank color essentially, color pass on the ship. So it just brings out a little bit more color in the ship. And then the adjustment has a glow on it as well. And then it has a little Gaussian blur on it also, which actually is turned off completely. So it's not really doing anything. Printing Comp 4 is all of these put together with the star field. So if we look at the effects controls, you'll see that there is a matte choker on probably each one of these. Yeah. So the matte choker, again, is to eat away and kind of chew up the last little bit of pixels so we don't have any weird outlining. So if we turned it off, you probably see, it's probably on here. You see a little bit of an extra bit of movement, or a little bit of like an extra white line. I did a motion blur on the ship, which you see kind of right there, which gives it a little bit more realism to what's moving across the screen where you can see it. And then the Gaussian blur actually is animated. So it's more blurry as it comes closer to the screen. So if we back up, so see right here, the Gaussian blur actually changes in blurriness at 32.5 right here, but then as the ship goes further away from the screen, or further away from the camera, it drops down to basically 0. So it's actually kind of coming into focus, so to speak, because my camera is focusing on the large ship right here. And then the star field itself is hand keyed onto the ship, or onto the planet. So it actually comes on. It's not perfect. I need to go in and mess around with the last little bit to see it kind of bounces. But it's not bad for, the majority of it. It actually looks pretty decent. But the final, piece of what we have is, a nice opening shot, I think, although it's not completely finished at this point. Lastly, we have this piece right here, which I think honestly this shot looks better. And this is actually the last shot of the film. This is where the Tuesday Dodo, which is actually the shots, are the main starship's name, the one that comes into frame, is called. And so the Dodo is kind of making its escape from the Lucky Stars, which is the large freighter. And so this one, I do a little bit more visual effect work. One of them is I'm doing a haloing effect for atmosphere, which I will be putting in the previous shot. That one was using Oh, what did I use? I used a royal blue solid, this right here. And this is actually just placed, again, the three elements here, the starship, the freighter, and the planet are all rendered out as separate batch renders. And then they're all comped together basically the same way the other ones were, or the other shot was. The royal blue solid was actually placed below the planet right here. And so that was, what did I do for that? That was given a glow, and then I did a matte choke on it as well. And then the glow, basically having it just placed directly behind the planet, gives it that kind of ethereal, atmospheric, bluish tint to it, which is kind of cool. And then with this ship, let me skip ahead a little bit. I was trying to figure out a way to do an effect for going to warp speed or doing a space jump. And so it's kind of a mix between Star Wars and Star Trek, where Star Trek, you actually see like a warping of the ship. It elongates and stretches and kind of rubber band snaps into space. And so I wanted something that was reminiscent of that. And so with that, I used lens flares essentially to create that effect, along with a ripple effect. Um, there is a physical stretching of the ship that goes on. Actually, end up stretching it in the 3D scene to where it actually snaps forward, and you'll see it in a second as it ripples forward. I did apply extra glowing right here on each one of the um, engine nacelles. So that was just a little circular solid that I had like a matte mask on and animated it. And then you'll see kind of the warping effect as it ripples forward and goes into space. And then the motion blur helps kind of get this to work out as well. The cool thing is with the ripple effect that I was using, it actually allows me to like send this shockwave out into space, which is kind of cool. So if you like look at the stars, you'll see this really subtle shockwave. So it's my first time doing a warp effect, and I don't know, I thought it was kind of okay. I thought it kind of worked. One of my friends is a big Star Trek fan, and he pointed out that there should not be so much blue in the star field, because actually in cosmology, yeah, I think that's like the study of stars or whatever. Blue and red tends to reflect or tend to show that stars are moving away or towards the person, the camera. And so what I think I might do is actually do a shift from blue to red as like the warp field expands out into space, but then they'll all just go back to white. So anyhow, a little bit of a nerdy bit of knowledge for that one. I like it. I think it works. So one more time. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how I was setting up some of these shots. I'm trying to make them look a little bit, more interesting. So yeah, so that's kind of what I was playing around with. Obviously, I'm not expecting this from you guys, but I want this to give you some ideas of what you could be doing to create, really interesting shots. Honestly, what I do expect out of you is just going in and doing some base color work, just making things a little bit brighter, a little bit darker if you need to. Just trying to make it look a little bit more like how you envision it to look. Because when stuff comes out of a batch render, it hardly ever looks as amazing as it could look. So it's really up to you guys to, to make it look even better. So anyway, I'll stop there and I'll talk to you guys in class.